It all started when an African-American woman in her 40s was pulled over by the California Highway Patrol. The year before, she'd been driving her white Chrysler on the 10 freeway in Mid-City around 7 p.m. on a Sunday when Officer John Europe noticed that her brake lights weren't working. So he turned on his flashing lights and signaled for her to pull over. As soon as the woman came to a stop, several other police cars arrived on the scene, but not because there was anything suspicious about the driver. It was just protocol for such stops in this part of town. Everyone was ready for a routine traffic stop. But while they approached the car, something made them take a second look. The driver looked fine, though a little pale. Her speech was slow and deliberate. But it was her eyes that unsettled the cops. They seemed vacant and soulless. Even after the officer asked her to roll down the window, they remained blank and lifeless. "License and registration, ma'am," said one of the officers. "Right here, officer," she replied softly. Her voice was unlike anything the officers had ever heard. It wasn't low or raspy. It was monotone and emotionless. She sounded like a robot. One of the officers leaned in closer. "Ma'am, can you step out of the car, please?" She did as she was told, slowly getting out of the vehicle and standing stiffly, as if she were a robot come to life. As she stood there, the officers couldn't help but notice how heavy her eyelids were. They almost looked like they were weighing her down. An officer reached out to steady her, but she swatted his hand away. "Don't touch me," she whispered, "or I'll kill you." All three officers were taken aback by her sudden outburst. But then another thought struck them. There was something strange about the car, something they couldn't quite put their finger on. There was an incredibly strong, rancid odor coming from the back seat. It smelled like rotten meat. Of course, the officers had dealt with drunk drivers before, but this smell was different. It was more potent, more disturbing. Then, as the squad car's headlights hit the back seat, they saw it, a dark stain on the upholstery. They shone the light again. It was definitely blood. They immediately drew their weapons and rushed to the back seat. Their eyes searched frantically for the source of the blood and the foul stench. Finally they saw it, a large black bag in the corner of the back seat. One of the officers cautiously approached the bag and gently lifted it. It was heavy. Inside the bag they found 2 garbage bags. They were tightly sealed, but the blood had seeped through. They quickly untied the knots and carefully peeled back the trash bags. Then what they saw made their blood run cold. It was 2 dead bodies, a man and a woman. They were both wrapped in plastic and duct tape. The man's hands were tied behind his back, and a black sock was stuffed in his mouth. The woman's ankles were bound together, and a similar sock was shoved into her mouth. They had been brutally murdered. But these murders were no ordinary crime. This case would go down in history as one of the most heinous and puzzling mysteries in California history. To make matters worse, despite such a horrific discovery, the woman in the car hadn't even broken down. She was still standing there emotionless, watching the officers work. They needed answers and fast, but where to start? The first thing they did was check the victim's vital signs, but they were long gone. They had been dead for quite some time. They then searched the car for any clues, and that's when they found something strange. In the front pocket of the passenger seat, they discovered a small piece of paper with some numbers written on it. It looked like a phone number, but it wasn't any number they recognized. Meanwhile, the woman continued to stand there motionless. Her face was expressionless. Her vacant eyes stared directly ahead. She didn't say a word. When the officers asked her questions, she just stood there unresponsive. They tried to get her to explain why she was carrying 2 dead bodies in her car, but she didn't respond. She didn't seem to hear them. Eventually, they decided to bring her in for questioning, but as they led her away, she suddenly snapped. "Don't touch me," she yelled, thrashing wildly as she struggled against their grasp. Once at the station house, the police began the long process of piecing together what had happened. The first order of business was to figure out who the victims were and how they had died. The only lead they had was the piece of paper with the mysterious numbers. They called the number and waited. Soon enough, a voice answered. "Hello," the voice said. "We're with the police," an officer responded, "and we'd like to ask you some questions about a missing persons report you filed last week." The person on the other end of the line was a middle-aged man. He sounded desperate. Yes, of course," he said. "What can I do for you?" The officer explained what they had found and asked if he could send someone to the station house to identify the bodies. The man hesitated for a moment. I don't know, he said. Can you tell me what the victims look like? The officer described the two victims in detail, but the man on the phone didn't seem convinced. I'm sorry, but I don't think I can help you, he said. I'll let my lawyer call you back. And with that, he hung up the phone. Police were puzzled. Why wouldn't the man want to identify his missing family members? Was he hiding something? Meanwhile, they turned their attention back to the prime suspect, the emotionless woman in the car. They had to get her to talk. After hours of relentless questioning, the woman finally broke down. She told the police her name was Diana, and that she had been hired to transport the bodies across state lines. She said she had picked up the couple, James and Cheryl, from a motel in Arizona, and was supposed to drive them to a cemetery in California. But according to Diana, she had no idea they were dead. She said she had only agreed to transport the couple because she owed the man money and he had promised to pay her $10,000 in cash upon delivery. Now, this made sense to the police. Why else would she have been driving around with two dead bodies in her car? With this new information, the police were able to confirm that James and Cheryl had indeed been reported missing. But as they dug deeper into the case, they uncovered something strange. The couple had been reported missing by their son David, and he had provided the police with a photograph of the couple along with their description. But when the police showed the woman's photo to Diana, she claimed it wasn't her. That's not my mother, she said. You have the wrong person. She insisted that she had been hired to transport to other people, not James and Cheryl. As the investigation continued, the police found themselves at a crossroads. Did Diana know the couple? Had she been lying to protect someone? Meanwhile, the man whose picture Diana had failed to recognize was identified as Cheryl's boyfriend, David. At first, he had seemed distraught over his mother's disappearance. He had told the police that he had unseen her for several days, and that he was worried about her well-being. But now that she was dead, David was acting strangely. He was calm, almost too calm. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He didn't even seem sad. The police decided to bring David in for questioning. We just have a few questions for you, son, one of the officers said. Sure, anything you need, David replied. He answered all their questions truthfully, or so he claimed. He told them that he had seen his mother and stepfather leave for California, but he had no idea what had happened to them. However, something about his story didn't sit right with the police. It just didn't add up. Meanwhile, as the police continued to investigate, they learned something shocking. David had taken out a large life insurance policy on his mother just weeks before she went missing. He had also been living with his mother and stepfather, which raised suspicion. Why would he have killed them if he had nothing to hide? The police confronted him with their findings. We know you killed your mother and stepfather, David, one of the officers said. I didn't do anything, David replied, his voice shaking. But the police weren't buying it. They had enough evidence to charge him with murder. But as they led him away in handcuffs, David turned back to the officers and said, You got the wrong guy. You have no idea what you're doing. And with that, he disappeared into the interrogation room. As the police continued to investigate, they uncovered a web of lies and deceit. Diana had indeed been hired to transport the couple, but she had never met them before. She had only agreed to help because she owed James money. She said she had picked up the couple from a motel in Arizona and was supposed to drive them to a cemetery in California. But according to Diana, she had no idea they were dead. She said she had only agreed to transport the couple because she owed the man money and he had promised to pay her $10,000 in cash upon delivery. This made sense to the police. Why else would she be driving around with two dead bodies in her car? But who had ordered the hit, and why? As they dug deeper into the case, they uncovered a trail of clues that led them to a shocking discovery. James and Cheryl had been killed by someone close to them, someone they trusted. But who could have done such a thing and why? The answer to this question would shock the entire community. In the end, the police were able to solve the mystery and bring the killer to justice. But the story doesn't end there. Stay tuned for more updates to find out who the killer was and what their motive was. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe for more crime stories just like this one.